Yet another fire has broken out at one of the nation's biggest atomic power stations, and further radiation leaks are feared. The exclusion zone has been extended around the Fukushima Daiichi plant, where workers are attempting to extinguish the new blaze.
Really wrong. The promise of spring in Tokyo. This should have been the season of hope and reawakening. Instead, the country is in deep shock, dealing with calamities that travel in packs. People are always loath to trust the air they breathe here. Masks against pollen or bacteria are a common sight. But now the breeze carries a new, unquantifiable menace called radiation. It has kept busy streets empty. This is the famous fish market at lunchtime. I've never seen it so eerily empty, this fishmonger told me. A city that is used to never running out of anything is suddenly staring at empty shelves. People have hoarded basic goods in fear of worse to come. Okay. Fuel has become a prize only for the most patient. Petrol queues lasting several hours, another first for Tokyo. And then there is the growing urge to just get out, to leave the country. We bumped into Mark Law, British banker, resident of Tokyo, father of 3.
Unfortunately, we can't leave. I have a younger daughter who's in hospital at the moment for scheduled heart surgery, so we can't go anywhere. So, you know.
But if you could, would you?
I'm thinking of getting the family out, yeah.
Where to?
Anywhere close, because my daughter can't travel very far, you know, unfortunately. So, you know, she needs to have aftercare, cardiac aftercare, so it's a bit of a bad situation for us.
Shibuya Junction. This is the busiest zebra crossing in the world at the busiest time of day here in Tokyo. But believe you me, compared to all the other times that I've been here, this is surprisingly empty. Many people have simply stayed at home, either because of transport problems or because they're afraid. And although there's no panic here in Tokyo, there is definitely a sense of nervousness. The Japanese are resilient and resourceful, and the wind has done them a favor, for now, by changing direction and blowing any radiation out to sea. But that's hardly reassuring for a nation dealing with catastrophe in a cloud of uncertainty. Well, let's look at some of the political implications of this unfolding crisis, unfolding on so many different levels, and talk to my guest, Dr. Kuni Miyake. He's the Director of Research at the Cannon Institute for Global Studies. Thanks for coming on the program. I mean, there's been an awful lot of talk about whether the government is responding well to this crisis or not. And of course, we remember the criticism after the Kobe earthquake in 1995. How well are they doing?
Well, we are shocked, sorrow, and fear and anger.
Right.
But we are still not ready to be angry at the government yet, because we are in the middle of the crisis now.
It's too early for that.
Too early for that. And I think so far they are trying to manage, and we have to support them in the middle of the crisis anyway.
Do people in Tokyo, where there are so many rumors and there's so much conjecture about what's actually happening at this power plant, believe what the government tells them on state television?
Well, I don't think there's any cover-up so far, and the Chief Cabinet Secretary has been telling the truth so far. But the question is, we are not dealing with the government, we are dealing with the reactor, and we are dealing with the nature. And I think it's so hard to predict what would happen next.
How much of a blow is this crisis that's unfolding on so many different levels? You could call it a quadruple whammy if you include the stock market. How much of a blow is this to Japan's self-esteem?
It could be huge, but this particular moment we cannot say anything. We just have to recover. The devastated site first. Then we think about the economy. But definitely they will have a blow on the Japanese economy.
1/3 of the power that Japan, the third largest economy in the world, consumes comes from nuclear power. Do you think there'll be questions now about the nature of that?
Well, at this moment, nobody talks about it, but eventually, when we pass the point of height of the crisis, probably we will start reviewing such questions, I guess.
I mean, one thing that's really struck me, Mr. Miyake, is that despite the fact that this is such a serious crisis, as the Prime Minister said, the worst since World War II, the response has been amazingly disciplined and resilient. And is that because Japan has been through some pretty tough times in the last 2 decades?
Well, I think we are trained for this, and I believe that look at the people in here. I think they seems to be calm. They are not panicking, and I think they are ready to go on for a while. But I think the longer it goes, then probably the more angry they will be eventually against, not against the nature, but against the government. Somebody has to be a guinea pig anyway.
You can't blame Mother Nature, but you can blame the government.
Right.
And do you think this will change the way that this country tries to protect itself in the future from earthquakes and tsunamis? I mean, we know about all the earthquake drills in this country. There aren't any tsunami drills. I guess there can't be.
Well, I think this time it's maybe 3 times or 4 times bigger than the expected worst case scenario. So it's so difficult to predict that things like this will happen again. But still, we have learned so many lessons. And it's time to review all the fail-safe measures concerning the nuclear power plants.
Well, we wish you the best of luck, and we'll all be watching, of course. Dr. Kunimaki, thank you very much indeed. Well, there you had a political and social perspective on the crisis here in Japan. And of course, it is 5 days old in terms of the earthquake, but in terms of the unfolding events, this is still very much in its early stages.
And as Alistair Leithhead reports from Minami Sanriku, survivors are left simply trying to figure out what to do next.
As the tsunami tore down homes and swept everything away, the little village of Asahigaoka was just high enough up the hill to escape the surging wave. They're still in shock, still unsure who's alive and who's dead. But in Asahigaoka, there's work to be done. Life's now about improvisation. They need drums to boil water. All supplies are cut off. There's no power, no cell phones. But it's organised and efficient. Drinking water is rationed. Resources are pooled. Vans bring the essentials to the community centre. Rice and fuel. Koji Oyama fell into the leadership role. Everyone's got their own jobs to do. We have 800 people to feed, he told me, with households taking in those made homeless. But we haven't even water clean enough to wash our faces. The army is now starting to help them, but the scale of the task is immense. There are hundreds of these small villages that will need supplies and help for weeks. The priority is now to help people get back to normal, he said. But we've never had anything like this before.
This is as far as the tsunami got in this village. You can see everything here was destroyed, as was everything in the valley leading up to it. And we heard there were 2 people in this house, a man and a woman, both quite elderly. She was rescued, but he was swept away. And then the wave just stopped at the top of this hill. Everything beyond that was fine.
Yukio Sato's family home was on the right side of that line, but only just. Debris from the 30-meter high wave stopped just short of the back door.
Just here it stopped. And this? So the water got to this level?
It was astonishing. There used to be lots of houses down there, and they're all gone. The buildings from below washed up here and were crushed.
Chance, the difference between a home saved and many lives lost. Life in Asahigaoka is just going to get harder, but the Japanese stoic way of dealing with it helps a lot. For the children, it's different and exciting, but something they'll never forget. And neither will those who lost relatives and friends, homes and possessions, and will now have to begin again. Alistair Leithhead, BBC News, Asahigaoka Village, Japan.
Well, as Japan's economy struggles to cope with the multiple blows at New York's JFK airport, each passenger flying to or from Tokyo has their own story. For some, it's flying away from the tragedy, while for others, it's a return to a country which has been forever changed. The BBC's Laura Trevelyan has that story.
A routine scene. International arrivals at John F. Kennedy Airport. But there's nothing routine about the experiences of the passengers who've come from Japan. They've left a country scarred by catastrophe. 11-year-old Marin Soki was evacuated from the Sendai disaster zone.
There was an earthquake in Japan, and everything fell and tsunami came. It was so scary.
And what happened to you? How did you get out?
I got out with my friends because I was in the school. So my parents came to pick me up.
Somehow, Marin's family managed to escape.
Now we are here. It's a miracle because many people are helping us, and you go there, you go there, and you take a train, and you take a bus, and you take a taxi, but it's just a miracle.
For those waiting for flights back to Japan, it's a difficult and unsettling time too. While they've been away, their country has undergone a traumatic experience, and they don't know what they'll be returning to. We met Natsumi Nishimura just as she was saying goodbye to her sister and mother, who live in Osaka.
They're very anxious, they're very worried about because they're not sure what happened exactly. So, and the earthquake may happen again. So, yeah, actually me also, I'm worried about them.
Miyagi, Fukushima.
Atsuko worries about more earthquakes spreading across Japan. For Japanese passengers, emotions are mixed. Relief at having left the chaos behind is intermingled with concern about what the future holds. Laura Trevelyan, BBC News, New York.
For more on how the people of this rattled country are coping, we go back now to Matt Fry, who's in Tokyo. Matt, whilst you've been reporting from that street scene in Tokyo, I've been struck by the number of people walking past you, holding their briefcases, almost as if there was a kind of normalcy about their daily lives. How are the Japanese coping with what, even for them, even for this very rigid, hierarchical, rule-bound society, is an extraordinary situation?
Well, Katy, you know this country as well as I do. In fact, probably a lot better because you lived here for 5 years. So you also know that the people of Japan aren't exactly exuberant when it comes to showing their emotions. There's a lot of fear and a lot of anxiety, as we heard just earlier in the program from Dr. Miyake. And that fear and anxiety is played out behind closed lips and face masks. So you can't always see it. But when you ask people, they will be quite open about it. What are they fearful of? Well, they're obviously deeply shocked by the extraordinary grief and tragedy unfolding in the northeast of the country. Remember, they themselves felt the earth move quite literally beneath their feet last Friday, and were really happy to have survived this earthquake, which in this city was shaking skyscrapers like palm trees. Then there is the collapse of the stock market, and of course that's going to open in a few minutes from now, and we wait to see what happens there. And then the fear of radiation, which is so unquantifiable in so many ways. And when there's little trust in what the government is telling you, when there is a history of obfuscation and to some extent even lies about this issue, then of course people have every right to be afraid.
Matt, it's also a country where, of course, community ties, family ties, are very strong indeed. And I imagine you've seen people, spoken to people in Tokyo who are very preoccupied with the scenes that they're seeing up there in the north. I mean, how much are people in Tokyo following, conscious of, stunned by the totally opposite scenes that they're seeing of complete devastation? Their city's functioning okay. The north is almost obliterated.
Well, you know, Japan is an island. It is a long island, and compared to the United States, quite a small island. And so what happens in the north of the country deeply affects people here, not just because of relatives or friends, but also because it's really not that far away. I mean, Fukushima, the nuclear power plant, is 140 miles from here. So that wonderful breeze that I'm feeling on my cheeks here has a rather sinister connotation when you think of radiation. Then the fact that it's, you know, if the bullet train worked, it would be a 2-hour ride straight into the disaster zone, where it is like being on a different planet. The devastation is complete. And that is something that affects people here deeply, because the same thing could theoretically happen in this city too.